Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today let's make a gravity ice dyed shirt. For this shirt, I'm using a straight edge and a washable marker, and I'm going to draw myself a diagonal line from the shoulder portion of the shirt all the way down to the opposite hem of the shirt. Now I'm going to accordion fold the line that I just drew. And I'm going to use a straight edge to kind of do the width or gauge the width for the first few folds. Once I have the shirt folded, I'm going to hold the folds in place with some kite string. And I'm not going to extend the kite string beyond this center area that I have folded. Like I said, I'm going to gravity dye this shirt, so I want to leave the other portion on either side of this line free so that the dye can flow down that area. So for this shirt, I've chosen Blood Moon, which is one of the new Dharma ice dye colors, and Pillars of Creation, which is an ice dye color from Grateful Dyes. Both of those have some cool color splits, which I think will blend well together. For my setup, I have 2 sawhorses and a piece of vinyl guttering turned upside down on top of the sawhorses. That leaves the flat part of the guttering up, where I'm going to place the shirt and that initial line that I folded and tied right on top of the guttering. The shirt is still damp, but I want it to be really damp so that the dye flows well. So I'm going to spray it with a soda ash solution that I have inside of a plastic spray bottle. I'm going to begin by applying Blood Moon from Dharma to what is going to be the top portion of the shirt. So the part of the shirt that contains the neck and one sleeve. I'm going to put a pretty good amount of dye on the shirt and extend it just a little bit where it will hopefully flow down the shirt a little easier. Then on the other portion of the shirt, which is going to be the lower part of the shirt and the other sleeve, I'm going to place Pillars of Creation from Grateful Dyes. For the most part, when I do a gravity dye, I like to apply a lot of dye on top of the shirt and then just continue adding layers of ice to kind of force that dye to dissolve and flow down through the fabric and down the shirt. So I'm going to add quite a bit of dye to the top of this shirt. After I have the dye on the shirt, I'm going to add a little bit of additional dry soda ash to the top just because I am going to add a lot of ice and there's going to be a lot of water flow through the shirt. So I want to make sure I don't rinse out all of the initial soda ash from the soda ash soak. And then I'm going to add on a larger chunk of ice. This one is one that I made in a Cool Whip container. Where I live, it gets really hot. And so when I do these gravity dyes outside, the ice melts so quickly. If I use these larger chunks of ice, I don't have to replace the ice every few minutes. These are lasting probably almost an hour before I have to replace the ice. So I added quite a few layers of ice onto this shirt. Like I said, the object is to continue adding ice until most of the dye is dissolved and the dye is all the way through to the edge of the shirt. Once I was content with the dye being dissolved and the dye all the way through to the edge of the shirt, I took this shirt and placed it inside of a container that has a metal rack in the bottom. I placed the lid on the container and then I left the container outside in the heat for about 24 hours so that the shirt could process. If you're leaving your shirt outside to process, you need to keep an eye on it and make sure it doesn't dry out. To keep it from drying out, you can either add a little bit more ice or you can come back in and lightly spray it with the soda ash solution. So to rinse my shirt, I went ahead and took it to my utility sink and I began rinsing it in cold water to rinse out the soda ash. Then I untied the shirt and warmed the water up to hot, and I continued rinsing in hot water to rinse out the excess dye that didn't bond with the fabric. Instead of rinsing for a long time, I went ahead and soaked the shirt. And to do that, I placed the shirt in my utility sink along with some really hot water and a little bit of Blue Dawn dish soap. I allowed the shirt to soak, and when the water cooled off, I changed it out, and I continued that soaking process until my water was remaining almost clear. Then I placed the shirt along with some Dharma's professional textile detergent into my washing machine, and I washed it using a hot water cycle. Okay, so let's see what the shirt looks like. Okay, so what do you guys think? Because I think this one looks really cool. I really like this color combination. You know, when I did the color swatch for the Blood Moon, it has a little bit of like a gray color that comes out of it. And so I thought that would pair really nicely with the Pillars of Creation. And I think it does. I love the color split that comes out of the Blood Moon. You know, Blood Moon is really more of kind of a terracotta orangish red rather than a more purpley red. And so I thought it would look nice with the Pillars of Creation that has the different shades of gray. And then it also has kind of a little bit of a coppery brown color, which you see down in that one corner of the shirt, which I think looks really pretty with that Blood Moon color. So I love the color combination. I think it's really pretty. And I love the design or the pattern that was formed with the diagonal folds where the dye kind of flows down those folds. You know, I have some darker shades of the Blood Moon and darker shades of the Pillars of Creation where they follow those folds. And I think that's really cool. I like that effect. I like the color variation right in there. Honestly, whenever I do this kind of a fold with the gravity dye, I almost think they look like rows of teeth, like the roots of the teeth and rows of teeth. I don't know, I think it's kind of fun. So the only downside about gravity dyes is you do tend to get quite a bit of speckling on a gravity dye, just simply because where I live it is literally windy all the time. And so the dye tends to blow around and then it just kind of falls down on the shirt just because it's a gravity dye and it's outside. So I've had little critters get into my gravity dyes while they're being done outside, but you do get quite a few little sprinkles. With this one, you can see it in the Pillars of Creation down toward the bottom, but I think that kind of looks cool on the shirt. I don't mind the sprinkles as bad as some people do. I know some people are very against any of those, but they really don't bother me. For the gravity dyes, I think they're just kind of part of the design. But be aware that if you don't like any kind of sprinkles on your shirt, gravity dyeing might not be for you. Or you might have to figure out some way to do your gravity dyeing inside. But I personally think a little bit of speckling is worth it for the cool dye flow that comes with all the gravity dyes. I absolutely love the way the dye is just freeform. It follows the pleats or the folds in the shirt and just runs down those. I love that. Dye flow is my favorite thing about gravity dyeing. But what do you guys think about this shirt? Do you like these colors paired together? Do you like the shirt? Do you like the technique? Please drop me some comments down below and let me know. And if you've enjoyed the video, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it and if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.